really fun shaping a batard, which is also known in English as a torpedo. And the way you get it to be fatter in the middle and pointy and skinnier in the sides is to make a V. And here, this has been sitting for 20 minutes resting, and it's a little sticky, so I always add the minimum amount of flour, but I don't dimple the dough because here I like to have holes in the dough. I like the sound of it too. I want a little flour here so it doesn't stick to my hands, but less flour on the board so that I have the resistance when I'm shaping it. So I start by making this V formation. See how it's fatter in the middle? And then folding it down and over. See how it's becoming a long torpedo-shaped bread? It's okay for flour to be on the outside because it gives it a nice crust and color. And then I use my thumbs at the very end and roll it over so that the seam is at the bottom. And you see what a nice pointy shape? I just love the way this came out. And I transfer it to a prepared baking sheet that has some parchment on it, so it'll be easy to transfer it to the oven. And set it down, and if it's not perfectly even, this is the time to straighten it, because after it's risen, you don't want to deflate it and lose any of the air. And you can, if you want it to be shorter and stubbier, you can just adjust it now. It's totally forgiving dough. And that's the batard torpedo. And here we have the batard or torpedo that we shaped before. That's perfectly risen. And the way you can tell it's perfectly risen, because when something is doubled and it's not in a container, how do you know it's doubled? You press it gently with your finger, and you see how it's filling in, but slowly. If it kept the depression, that would mean that it wouldn't continue to rise as much in the oven, and when you slash it, it wouldn't have those wonderful, open, beautiful slashes. Now, I've tried so many different devices for slashing, and I find that a single-edged razor blade really works the best. I like to have the slashes go the long way and overlap slightly. And don't be nervous about making the slash, because if it's not deep enough, you can go back and do it again. So you can make your first slash more tentatively if you want. You don't have to be decisive. And that's nice. That little rough thing, because when it opens up, gives a wonderful rustic look. Now the third one will be about down there. Yep, so I can start this one here. And see how the risen dough just opens up so beautifully? And the last one, the third one, will be just about here. I think that's just about perfect, but if I wanted to clean it up a little or slash a little more deeply, I could just return to it. And now we're ready to put it in the oven. But not quite, because there's one more thing I like to do, and that's spritz the dough with water. And what this accomplishes is it keeps the top crust really moist, so it enables it to rise and open up more, but it also enables it to gelatinize better. That means that the sugars and the starches become shiny, and you get a crunchy, crisp crust. Voila, the batard. Here are the 3 different doughs that we shaped, all from the same basic dough, but 3 different breads. Aren't they lovely? Nothing is better than homemade bread. Shaping dinner rolls is really fun, and there are 2 ways to do it. This is a great thing to involve kids with. You start off by cutting the dough into the size that you're going to want. And don't forget that bread dough increases, it expands greatly when it's rising and when it's baking. But the important thing is not to tear it, because if you tear the dough, you destroy the gluten and you destroy the texture. Use shears or use a dough divider, bench scraper. I like to divide the dough first. See, it's sticking together because it's wonderfully moist dough, and then you can always cut it afterwards. And let it sit, but sit covered, because you don't want it to form a crust. The easiest way for me to do it is to just, now if there's too much flour on the board, as there is right now, it's not going to work as well to form the ball, but here, now it's working. Use the minimum amount of flour so that you have this sort of traction, and it balls up under your hand, and the gluten redevelops, and you have a wonderful round little ball. And you set it on your prepared baking sheet with parchment. And if you find you're having problems getting it to mound up, but I think it's a lot more fun doing it that way, you can just pat it into a little patty and then bring up all four corners. Well, they don't really have corners, but you bring up the edges into the very center, pinch it together, and there you have another nice shape. And it doesn't matter if it's slightly uneven, because as it's rising, it will fill in and be totally even. Or you can take it and roll it just lightly, and that's another method to do it. I space them about like this so that they don't touch, but if you wanted them to touch, you would put them about like that. And then as they expand, especially during baking, they'll stick together. And that's all there is to doing a dinner roll. Here are the 3 different doughs that we shaped, all from the same basic dough, but 3 different breads. Aren't they lovely? Nothing is better than homemade bread. One of the best secrets to know about professional bakeries for bread is called retarding the dough. And that means letting it sit overnight in the refrigerator, which develops more flavor, but it also enables you to fit it into your time schedule better. This is the dough that's already been kneaded and is ready to perhaps do its first rise or its second rise, and you can do that in the refrigerator overnight. I use a heavy-duty bag that's resealable, and I spray it with nonstick cooking spray so it doesn't stick to it. And just slip the dough in, press out a little of the air, and seal it up. And now it's ready to be put in the refrigerator, and about an hour later, if you want to check it, you can just pat it down a little so it doesn't over-rise. So the next morning or afternoon, when you're ready to bake, just take it out of the refrigerator, let it sit in the bag for an hour to warm up to room temperature, and all you need to do is shape it, let it rise, and bake it.